Share up, share up.
Share up the live, my friends.
Share
Good
up
night,
the line.
villagers. Good night, and welcome to the. Well, let me wait for some people to come in live first before I start to talk, right?
Right.
Might
I
help.
just seen it.
Yeah, that might help.
Right.
All right, let me see if I get this share up this live now. Let me find this live to share up. Where are we? Where are we? Heights room live. Where's it? Share up the live, my friends. All right, good night, people, and welcome to Heights Room. I believe it's our fourth installment for the live sessions,
Yeah.
and this is our lockdown edition. And
Lockdown.
fellas, I shit you not. Every time the man bust a restriction, we live, and it's not planned.
Oh,
You realize that?
yeah.
The past 3 times the
Or
man
is
talk
it?
on different days of the week, right?
Yeah.
Every time the man talk, we had already planned our lives, so it's working. I tell you, we in the zone, we in the zone.
It's a heights.
It's our height, it's our height. It's a feeling. It's a flavor. All right, so we
Who
getting
eat
a
from the KFC food truck?
big feedback there from somebody speakers. So lockdown people, full lockdown this time around, right?
Full
We
lockdown.
back to where we were around March last year.
We had
Okay.
before partial.
Right now we were on just no restaurants and no entertainment. It never had much entertainment going on anyway. So restaurants got the hit. However, he had allowed street food, which is a big confusion, right? Because I don't understand how it is. You want to prevent people from moving around, and people would want to move around for, the usual, buy a food here and there. You say no KFC and so on, but you're allowing the Cross and Grand Bazaar. So what you had weekend, the masses converge on the Cross, right? They converge on the Grand Bazaar, and now they have no street food, no retail at all, no retail. So Ratans close. All right, sports and games, all these brothers closed, all the malls closed. Only essential services, right? Only essential services, and this brings us back to the issue we were having a year ago, where we had people out of work for months, and the financial strain that put people through, and people haven't recovered from that yet. And at this point in time now, it's back to square one for a lot of people. A lot of people could not recover from that last lockdown, and now they have no choice but to close their businesses. This indoor facility, a real well-known indoor facility by Torian, Real go and use it to sweat and thing, real state-of-the-art vibes. They say these are there, they're gone, they're
Can't
done.
make.
They can't make with this one. They say this one means that's it. That's the end of that. So
That hard.
you really had to study the kind of hardship that people are going to be going through right now with regards to this lockdown now. You really had to study what it is people are going to do in these industries. Okay, bars closed. Bars were already suffering because you could not drink in the bar. Okay, and for good reason, right? We could understand that there is a concern there with people bar hopping, which would have caused a lot of the random spikes that took place. But you see, the problem is that your boy come today in the suit and tie, so you don't know nothing was going to take place, right? Suit and tie means full lockdown. So you come in the suit and tie, and he come and he started scold people and do the usual antics. And I'm like, but and you the same man who just the other day tell people, if you feel into party, go to Tobago. If you feel into take a flight, go to Tobago. Go to
Yeah. Okay. So that was a real thing. He really said that.
Yes. Right? The man said that. And when you went to Tobago, you'd realize in Tobago, there was a different code. Police wasn't getting on for nothing. People was lane, right? So in the water, remember, beaches wasn't locked down. So in the water, right? They're in the water, right? When you're in the water, you don't want to wear mask, and people was in the shallow one thing, people by the dozen. All right. The party was nice, the fete is grand. Okay. Easter, right? They're going to celebrate the birth. And what's going on now is that. So what we have now is the spike that we were waiting for since Christmas. Well, since after Christmas, I would say. Christmas and Easter combined, and boom. This was coming, right? But is the lack of maintaining a certain order that, I mean, it falls on the responsibility of Trinidadians to be a little bit conscientious. But it also falls within the purview of the ministries and so on to communicate things in a certain way that people understand why it is you have certain measures. And then there's also this the mystification of whether the COVID is as dread as it is and all these kind of things. Because a lot of people asking, why do people flout these restrictions so much? Why do people just, they take any chance they get? Like, so right now, as we speak, the Cross and David Double standing lit because this is their last hurrah. Okay, last week was KFC, right? KFC pop off, right? Now, right now, the doubles and all the street food, people, by the dozen over there. And why do people flout these restrictions? So why people don't take this thing seriously? And it may be because people really and truly don't believe that it is that
serious,
dangerous and that serious. And there is a area for debate there, right?
But who? What is the numbers that prompting this lockdown, Qatar? What is so bad in the numbers that really, okay, we are a lockdown now?
The number of cases when they do their tests, the number of cases that coming in, which were like at a point a few months ago, you were getting like 3, 4, 10, 20, 7, right? We're going back to this 100, 200, 300.
Right after Easter, right? Right after Easter, right?
Right.
Right after Easter. How much of that numbers is Trinidad and how much is Tobago?
In what way? People who live in Tobago, people who went from Trinidad
Correct.
to Tobago.
Because if the spike happened over Easter, I mean, I know Easter would have changed that much, but most people around Easter time, they just go to Tobago. So if it is, you end up with like 300 and your numbers between 300, 200, whatnot. How much of that 300 is Trinidad and how much of that number is Tobago? Where did the infection take place?
Well, no one really knows because when it comes to contact tracing and information about this, that is what is really not very clear. People and there's also a lack of and I can't say who's to blame here, but there's a lack of humanizing this virus, I would say, in Trinidad. When you think about this virus right now, if you don't know somebody who personally suffer from it, you really don't know what is going on with people and this virus, like how it look, how people suffer, what hear a story about nobody. There's nothing in the news that really tells you like that. I would say humanize the situation now. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know whose fault is that, but the point is that people don't really know that there is suffering that will take place due to this thing, and they just think that well, it have a virus going wrong, it might kill some old people, and that seems to be the word because people just don't. They scare tactic, and not even scare tactic, but the fear that was there when the thing now was. Not there anymore. But now people will get a little afraid now because they see numbers. But actually, what do they fear? Is they don't really what it is they fear, really and truly.
Yeah, but you see, here's the concern I have though, Qatar, before the conversation move in that direction. A properly administered, I mean, it's an emergency situation, so you can't always have things, running like a well-oiled machine and that kind of thing. But I mean, if Trinidad and Tobago had gotten numbers down to 10 and 15 and that kind of thing, you would have imagined that you would have had a certain level of control of the system at a certain point in time. When you have control of a system at that stage, fear isn't really a factor. You understand? That really shouldn't be a factor to try and control people to do certain things. And why I mention that is that the lack of information or the selective lack of information, to me, it breeds this sort of fear-based sort of system. And everybody you talk to, they're on edge. I mean, the economy wasn't great before, you know what I mean? And that edge, that precipice just start to continue even more. Hey, big up our Barca brethren on
Yeah.
like a man like DJ Bless, man, that'll big him up. You understand? So, it's a matter of, something from that perspective. And even like I could say from out here, the responsibility of social distancing and so on is that of the organization, Qatar. So if you go in Bank of Guam, or if you go in FSM Bank, or if you go in this fast food place and whatnot, they as private institutions, their responsibility is to ensure social distancing. So when I see what happened with KFC and that kind of thing, and people, you're playing your ass, ting, and Chinese have it. Whose responsibility is that? So in other words, and I talking to a point where the banks actually had certain chaperones who they actually redesigned certain portions of the bank, because you could design these things. If you had to go 6 feet apart, you could design certain controls whereby people always stay 6 feet apart. So when you have a mad scene where people line up and there's this big massive crowd, and that is a design issue. You understand? So to me,
engineers,
right. And why I'm mentioning that, Qatar, is that, and you're seeing it in the comments, you're hearing it in people's responses. People issue isn't so much the lockdown, is that the lockdown coming with exactly the same measures as a year ago. So it's like if we didn't learn anything. You understand what I'm saying?
And exactly, and that's the problem. That is the real problem, That's the real problem I'm seeing. I'm seeing that it's just like we're going in a circle,
Mm-hmm.
It's just a total circle. Now 180 at 360, and you're back to where you started now. You know what I mean?
Justin was saying that in the comments there. Same place a year ago. Nothing ain't changed. Real move.
Right. Now, what we really have to wonder now is at what price does this lockdown come? And we have a guest with us tonight. All right. I know I promised you all last time we'll be having a guest on, and he's here tonight. So we're going to bring on now Dr. Rajiv Seereeram. Now, Dr. Seereeram is a doctor who works in the private sector, and he is also authority on the area of nutrition. He's a nutritionist, and he also deals specifically with people with diabetes and so on. So we are bringing on Dr. Seereeram right now to join the conversation, because Dr. Seereeram has a lot of takes on the situation that you may not hear as much. So let's bring him on at this point in time. Good night, Dr. Seereeram.
Hi, good night.
All right, so we hearing you good there. Let me just see if the level's good. Right. So hearing you kind of soft. So if you could, Shankar and Torin, if you could mute for a second, so we just see if we get
better
more.
Now?
Better, much better, yes, much better. So I guess that's what's going on there, right? So Rajiv.
So thank you for inviting me.
Right, it's a pleasure to have you.
Shankara and Torian, yeah? That's
yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so good night, guys.
Right. So again, like many guests, we do share the same alma mater, but at that juncture in life, we never really had any kind of dealings. So, I really it's my first time really conversing with you in this way. But let me ask you, since the topic right now is the lockdown, how effective do you think this lockdown would be in your mind's eye in terms of limiting or having meeting an aim with limiting the virus?
Right. It's going to appear very, very effective.
Mm-hmm. It's going to appear effective.
It's going to appear to be very, very.
Why appear?
Right. So the data on lockdowns, the effect of lockdowns are conjectural, really. If you really look at the lockdowns, really the lockdown is a sort of broad term, right? So there are two ways to really stop the spread of the virus. One is what you call pharmaceutical, which is still being sort of worked out by the vaccine industry and so on,
Right.
or rolled out, I'd say. And the other one is non-pharmaceutical interventions. And non-pharmaceutical interventions really are all kinds of different things. Basically, masks, social distancing, standing 6 feet away from people in a line, masks in the car, if you could count things like that. Of course, controlling crowds in businesses, closure of schools, yeah, um, and closure of what you'd call non-essential businesses. I'm not too sure which particular businessman would accept that designation, but
Right.
so it's a whole bunch of different things. But I think when we talk about lockdowns, we talk about the most severe type of how would you say social restriction, in that all your non-essential businesses are closed, and people are advised to sequester inside. So you're advised to
Right.
basically stay at home.
Right.
And I'd have to say, during the first outbreak, I was one of the first persons to actually institute that for my family.
Right.
I saw what was coming. I saw it was a tsunami. We saw the footage in Italy and so on. And for me
Right.
personally, I stocked up on N95 masks. I even bought
Right.
gloves,
Right.
and I closed my practice for 2 months straight.
Okay.
Because I just didn't know what we were dealing with. I had no clue what we were dealing with, and I think it's better to be cautious than dead. That was in March, so February, March, April. By May, I think we had a pretty good idea what we were dealing with,
Right.
and in fact, I was totally against lockdowns by that time, because I realized during that time I tried to operate, just doing telemedicine and so on. And I realized by me not actually being there in person and functioning as a doctor, I probably was having more adverse outcomes with my patients than
Right.
COVID itself.
Right. Right.
Um,
And you deal with patients who, have the kind of comorbidities, as they would say, with people who have to get vaccinated, so like diabetes and so on, right?
yeah. I mean, a simple thing like this, I could tell you anecdotally, um, just having a patient sit down at home, averting healthcare because they are frightened of going to the hospital and nursing a heart attack. You have, and I'm pretty sure of it, that you had more deaths due to healthcare aversion over 2020 than COVID deaths. Because when you calculated the COVID deaths spread across 2020, it amounted to about 0.4 persons a day. 0.4 persons a day.
Right.
And in fact, in Trinidad and Tobago, you have about 11,500 deaths a year, which amounts to about 34 deaths a day. That's without COVID. So I'm just giving you some perspective
Yeah.
on exactly the effect of mortality that COVID had. So really, as we roll back the services in the healthcare sector, it would have been more devastating to overall morbidity and mortality than COVID would have ever been. When it comes to the present lockdown, I think that at the time we were just experimenting because we had no idea what we're dealing with.
What was going on?
What we were seeing, we were envisioning a tsunami of persons in the hospital with people on gurneys outside and so on. And what I realized is that that particular variant that hit us, which I would have said it was here in February, it really wasn't that bad.
Okay.
So you think it was here during Carnival?
Yeah, I think so. I had my first suspect case in February and the end of February.
Okay.
So when you say you had your, like, you mean into your practice?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Because we all seeing these cases. There's nothing you can do about that.
But did that suspect become
Well,
What was the
actual?
outcome? What was the outcome of that?
patient lived. I can't go into the details, but
No,
I can
no.
tell you
Of
at that
course,
time
yeah.
I had
Yeah.
no interactions. I had no interactions with the patient.
Okay.
I stood far back. The patient was in a car.
Okay.
I gave them a BP monitor, and I gave them. So it was a pretty scary thing because we had no idea what we're dealing with. All we know about is asymptomatic transmission, and we saw pictures of people in Wuhan collapsing on the street, and it is a really frightening situation, you know.
But now, as time has passed, right? And as you say, Wuhan, you say Italy, you say preparing for the tsunami, right? And then you mentioned that by the time May hit around, you are against lockdowns. What is the real change now? What is it? Not a tsunami anymore? Is it not? Is it a
It
small
certainly
wave?
is now. This whatever is going on now, we're facing something unprecedented in Trinidad. By the time we had the first lockdown, it was already too late in Trinidad. It was pointless, I would say. My own lockdown started, as I said, in March. That's my own personal lockdown. Right. Because at that point in time, we had persons coming in from China and so on. By the time the government decided to lock down, because they allowed carnival and everything to go, I don't think it would have made any difference. Because what happens is that the virus, if you look at the natural history of the virus, you have about a week, up to 2 weeks of incubation period. But basically, it's a week, about 6 days. And then that's the time when the patient is really asymptomatic but infected. Then you have about a pre-symptomatic period, which is about 2 to 3 days, where they are actually infectious but asymptomatic. Then you have about a 2 weeks period where the patients become symptomatic gradually. And if left untreated, they can, in a very small portion of them, progress to some kind of pulmonary lesion that could be fatal. You could land them in the hospital. So you have this protracted course, and that's what's so frightening about COVID. I've never seen a virus like this before.
Like this.
It's as if the virus was designed
right,
planned
to be maximally contagious.
Right.
You know,
So, wait.
People.
Just before you say saying maximally contagious, right?
Yeah.
You're saying that it spread like wildfire. You're trying to say,
But basically, remember, if you get a normal virus, right? Let us say influenza virus, or let's say you have some, the cold virus or something like that. You start to sneeze, you get a fever and so on. You say, well, wait, now something is wrong with me. I sit down at home.
Pick up on it. Yeah.
You say, but so you basically you self isolate. Okay, you're not gonna walk around and say, well, listen. But this is a case where people may be spreading it, not as much as we thought it was. Right. So how is this person supposed to act responsibly if they don't know that they have a virus? In fact, I think maybe 30 to 50% of persons will never manifest any symptoms, or never manifest any symptoms. What you will call, they'll be subclinical. So maybe you get up one day, you feel a little of the weather, and then you feel better the next day, and you go about your business. It's not something that's going to trigger you to say, oh gosh, I have COVID. Right? Besides, most people don't even want to think they have COVID. Right? So is what you'll say is almost like subclinical. It's just mild. It's so mild. Right? So you have a disease here that basically it tricks people so that they cannot act responsibly to stop the spread. Right? Which means what really occurred to me, what dawned on me during those 2 months when I was locked up at home, was that you can't stop the spread. You probably cannot stop the spread. It's a frightening prospect to actually think of that. But I mean, unless you completely halt society, you grind society to a halt, and somehow you're able to isolate all the reservoirs of the virus and eliminate it altogether, I mean, the death toll from that is going to be catastrophic. For example, if you look at India, you would say that India, I think, went up to 3,000 deaths a day.
Yeah.
Correct.
Which, of course, by comparison to the daily death rate in India, which is about 27,000 persons per day, that's without COVID.
Right.
It's still not acceptable, but it's, relatively, it's nothing compared to what's going on in New York and what went on in Italy and what's going on in Canada and so on. Right? The death rate in India is about 140 persons per million. That's the death rate. If you look at places like New York and so on, it's more than 2,000 persons per million.
So question.
So, well, if you look at India, the lockdown, really, you can see that about 2 million persons are under the threat of hunger. If you have 2 million persons severely weakened because of a lockdown, in fact, the granaries are full, but you can't go and walk and get they might whip you in the street and say, go back in your house. So if there's food there, but you can't access it, okay, you could imagine what the death toll would be. You have a whole weekend, you have 2 million persons going into starvation. And of course, the immune system is shot by that time. So you have children dying, you have all kinds of, right? So what we're saying is that the lockdown can be catastrophic depending on the society's capacity to buffer it. If you working from home and use IT specialist, well, all right, well, no problem.
Right. So is it if I understand what you're saying correctly, is it fair to say that perhaps not that lockdowns don't work, but perhaps how these lockdowns are executed, they might help a little better?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So what I'm asking is, so essentially you're saying just put in a blanket lockdown, not going to help anything. It didn't help anything. It won't help anything. But if those lockdowns were executed differently,
it depends on the timing.
Would that have made a difference?
Yeah. Well, I think the lockdown would have to start in February. Really, when you really think about it, the governments around the world will find it very, very hard to justify a lockdown if you do not have a state of panic in the society by way of an increase in numbers or deaths. If you're not seeing anything, right? If you have a very slight increase in numbers, right? Remember the reproductive number of the disease is about 3. So you can probably work it out mathematically. If you have 10 cases, besides which, if you detect 10 cases, you probably have, I don't know, maybe 50 cases or so. Okay. But if you start to see an outcropping of cases somewhere, then it means, and it will be small numbers at the time, I suppose. But if you see something like that happening and people becoming symptomatic, I mean, now you have to try to justify a lockdown when things are not looking so bad. It's a very difficult situation for the politicians. It's a very, very difficult situation. How to time the lockdown. If you want me, I can show you. We can show you. There are several studies that have been looked at it. Right. One study, this is by a Stanford group. They looked at the effect of lockdowns in several countries compared to. Just not trying to pull it up here.
Yeah. Take your time.
Yeah, hold on. Assessing the effect of lockdowns. Let me see if I could share this and you can see. Shall I share it?
Yeah, share. That will we bring you up.
Go right ahead, man. Go right ahead.
Right, let me see how you're sharing the screen now.
Sharing is caring.
All right, sharing is caring.
Shankara, quiet there, boy.
I'm thinking.
You're thinking, you're hearing thing.
All right.
I still not convinced that thing was here during Carnival, eh? I still not convinced. But I
was wondering about that too.
You remember in the majority of people, right? It's very very mild.
Yeah.
So if you have a whole, I'm talking about the vast majority. So you can have a whole bunch of people with a mild sore throat and get over. The question is when the virus catches the right person,
the right group. Yeah.
Then it registers as a death.
Tricky.
You understand? Then you register. Then it says, oh wait, there's something new here because this person is getting short of breath, very short of breath, and so on. The vast majority of persons are not going to have it. And when you look at families, I don't know. Are you seeing this here?
Not yet.
Not yet.
You're not seeing it.
If you look up on our screen yet.
All right, just now. Stop sharing. If you look at families that have the virus, what you will see is that you have about 5 persons in the family, and everybody is good except one person. And when you test them, they're all positive. Yeah, they're all positive. Let me see if I get this here.
How? I don't know if that's an interesting comment to say, because I hear anecdotally, of course, it would be really good if we get some solid numbers that you have entire families in the hospital or entire families that have passed. or like in the case in, I believe, in Nova Scotia.
Yes.
Ontario family moved to Nova Scotia. They had a housewarming party. All of a sudden, numbers went up in that town again because the Ontario family clearly brought it in.
So what we have here is a situation where the virus affects people very differently, and people try to say, listen, it's only old people and this and that, but because I'm young, it's not a big deal. I tell people, don't think that way. Okay, you can be 30 years and you can get a severe form of the disease, and then you could still live, of course, you could live, but you could have some kind of residual issue with the lungs, right? Or you could have gone through a period where you have some kind of myocarditis or something. You have some kind of fibrosis in the lung settling afterwards or something like that, right? The whole idea is that people's reaction to the virus, I liken it to being like a reaction to, like a allergic reaction to peanuts. Most people could eat peanuts and they're perfectly fine, right? But for some reason, you might be the unlucky person that eat the peanut, and all of a sudden you have an anaphylactic reaction and you die. So it is an interaction between your immune system and the virus that makes the virus uniquely deadly in some people. Right? So there's some interaction there, right? And I'm sure that if you go in the literature, you'll hear about things like cytokine storm, and you'll hear about people with all kinds of autoimmune, all sorts of immune reactions like thrombocytopenia and all kinds of different things, right? So it affects, right? So we are supposed to, as medical professionals, I would suggest we were supposed to be able to pick up those persons who are developing those reactions and try to get them urgent medical care. Now, there is, of course, some data on early care, early outpatient care, things like dexamethasone and so on, and some other therapies that have come under a lot of controversy, right? Things like ivermectin and so on. And I think it was, and I've been a supporter from the very beginning for an early outpatient treatment approach where you don't leave patients to sit down at home with Panadol, because that's what we're doing now. The Western societies have basically taken on, I would suggest, a strategy of therapeutic nihilism. There is nothing you can do. Just mind the virus. Stay home and mind the virus. Just take Panadol and wait it out. And if you happen to go into some kind of advanced respiratory problem, so you find you're desaturating or something, call the ambulance and they'll put you in ICU. That has been the strategy throughout. And it is a deadly strategy. Right? No early outpatient care.
Yeah, but Doc, let me ask this question, Doc. So in respect to the lockdown itself, and with the lockdown I'm talking about is this current lockdown that we're facing, is it that people look at it as a measure to control the spread of the virus? But in my mind, is it actually acting as, you would see a drop in the numbers, as you mentioned, it will appear to improve the situation, but really and truly that is just people just being forced to stay home, and as soon as they come back out, they will start to report cases again. So in other words, the lockdown itself is just helping, the virus, the numbers.
The virus is following a seasonal pattern, right? It has an epi curve where you have a wave and it goes down on its own. Right. So, and it probably depends on the novelty of the variant in the population, right? So if you probably have a new, and again, there's so many things unknown about the virus that we are just kind of making educated statements, educated guesses, right? But as far as I could see, it looks as if you guys still there?
Yes.
You guys still there?
Yep.
It looks as if when a new variant hits a country, you have a massive surge, right? So now we're not really doing a lot of studies. I think they said it had about less than 10 P1 variant or something, but it's probably more than that. It's probably more than that in Trinidad. Right? We don't know, we really never knew it. We don't really have that kind of contact tracing that we could really pick up. When they studied highly dense populations like in Pune, India, and so on, as in Maharashtra, and so, they found that 50% of the people in the country in the area were actually seropositive. They had antibodies already. It means that the virus is spreading very, very fast. That's like in India, yeah. So if you go and you do a survey, you go and you do a serology survey, you see, but wait now, half of the people may have COVID. You don't know, right? The problem is that our testing depends on persons. It really has an element of hysteria. If you're scared, you will go and get tested. Now, when we come back to the lockdown, right? I'm trying to share this thing here.
Not sharing.
Where is it? How can I share this?
Share
Right,
the
let me
link.
share the screen then. Are you seeing my screen? Are you seeing my screen?
No, it's not coming. I don't know if it's because we have 4 people on the live or anything like that. You think I'm not sure. Let me
yeah.
We'll drop one away now, Cutty. You
yeah,
can
let
drop
me see if I can do that.
Let me see how it is now. All right. You seeing that? Look like you're seeing it, no?
You hit share right next to Cam slide.
Yeah.
Anything?
I don't know.
Nothing?
All right, let me just, I suppose we could just read it. So at least in this study, I suppose what we could do, I mean, we could just chat, but although I would like to show you something.
See if you could
At
send me
least
the
in
link. If there's any way you could send me it on WhatsApp or on a link or anything, we could I could try to show it. But you could keep on I want to open up the line for a bit for the people who may have questions to just interact with them. So in the meanwhile, probably you could send me that on WhatsApp and I could see if I could pull it up, or if it's whatever it is, I'll link. See if you could send me it on WhatsApp and I'll see if I could pull it up. I don't know why that isn't working now, because that was working.
That I wouldn't be able to navigate it if it's on your side.
All right. Well, we could continue talking about it per se.
That's okay.
Read the data if you want.
That's okay.
So
no, but yeah. So really trying to pass the effects of the different non-pharmacological interventions, right? These guys in Sanford, they designed some models and so on, and they looked at what you would call more restrictive versus less restrictive measures. The less restrictive measures being things like, don't have 100% persons in church, go for 50%. So try to wear some masks, things like that. What they found is that in Sweden and South Korea, which did not adopt those very strict interventions, meaning lockdown of businesses, and sequestration at home, as in stay-home orders. So that's why we are kind of headed into that now. Lockdown of all businesses and stay-at-home orders. Those are the what you call restrictive options, right? Those things did not have any it did not create any difference in outcome versus other countries like Spain, the United States, England, France, Germany, Iran, Italy. It didn't change the outcome really. And there's a very nice article that was done by this guy, and he looked at it and he looked at outcome measures around the world, and what they found was that the majority of lockdowns, they started after the virus had already spread, and the virus has a natural epicurve. It comes and goes on its own, whether you lock down or not. So sometimes you attribute the success of the attenuation of the curve to the lockdown, when it really, it's not necessarily that.
It's marketing.
Yeah, but the politician can claim success.
Right.
In fact,
it's marketing.
Yeah, the politician, they strengthen their position because COVID is a very interesting tool for the politicians. Very, very interesting tool. Because it allows you to have a very unusual amount of power over a populace. And and the populace actually calls upon it. It's like a kind of self-flagellation. People are saying, yes, lock us down, please close my business down. It's like you're flagellating yourself. It's a strange thing. It's a very strange thing.
All right. I want to open up the line now for anybody who wants to call in. You can call the number on screen with a question. So that's a very interesting term you use there, self-flagellation. Right? I don't think anybody in Trinidad too into that. Right? Well, not in this case.
So one question we have in the comments, Doc, is you mentioned earlier that the current approach in terms of like stay home and take a Panadol and then come in if things get bad. What do you think would have been a better outpatient approach to the COVID?
Right. So this is where things get a little, or I would say highly controversial. There are different. There's actually a movement of doctors and health professionals around the world that really call for a different approach, which is an early aggressive outpatient approach. Some of it might be the use of a bit of steroids early on so that you can actually stop the inflammatory process. Some of it as well involves the use, of course, high doses vitamin D and zinc. There's some decent evidence for that. There's a meta-analysis that came out for ivermectin as well. And there's some meta-analyses for HCQ. But HCQ, of course, became the subject of much ridicule after it was touted by Trump. So, and that kind of buried it, which is a bit unfortunate. Really, we didn't have time to develop a vaccine safely and fully test it. So really, from a pragmatic approach, public health approach, it would make sense to look into repurposing therapies that are known to have antiviral properties and that have a very well-established safety profile. And that could have, and I would suggest that could have cut the death rate down by a significant amount. But you see, things again very, very controversial. So
Right. I have a call on the line here. So yes, caller, you'd like to ask a question, I believe.
Yeah. Hi. Good night. You'll hear me?
Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what I want to ask you, Doctor, and then I don't know, Cutter, if I could ask more than one.
Yeah. Hi. Go ahead now.
Right. Sure. So, could you have COVID but not have fever?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Because,
it have some people.
Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
No, it's just because that's one of the things that a lot of these places using as a marker. So when the temperature gone now. So I was at one point I wondered if because sometimes you hear about people having it, and some of them say they didn't have fever. So I was just wondering, what is it? And then I didn't hear, like in the press conference and stuff like that, I didn't hear anything else about, well, what are the range of symptoms basically that you could possibly have,
Right.
Yeah, I mean the hallmark symptom with COVID is fever, yes, a feeling of severe weakness, like what you call asthenia. You're just feeling mashed up, like a ton of bricks hit you. One of the other very unusual aspects of it that distinguishes it from, to me, most other viral infections is loss of smell, what they call ansomnia. Loss of smell, and person also has loss of appetite too.
Okay.
So, but to tell you the truth, as I said, plenty of people don't have any symptoms at all. Now the question is, how relevant is an asymptomatic person to the spread of the disease? And I think they are less. When they say carriers, these carriers then are less spreaders than we previously thought. Although in your pre-symptomatic state, that's about 2 to 3 days before you become symptomatic, I think that there is significant viral shedding, enough for you to actually spread the disease. So yeah, so that's pre-symptomatic, but that's different from asymptomatic. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the next part of the question too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with regards to the vaccine, I'm hearing some information from you that I didn't really hear before. So what are your thoughts on the vaccine? And, I know people are talking about this one from Cuba. I don't know what is, I don't know if you have any info on it or anything like that.
Really, I have no
All right,
insight
well,
on the Cuban vaccine.
Well, they bring up something very interesting there, caller. So I think I want to take us down our whole next well now. So we thank you for calling, and we're going to touch on that topic now of the vaccine. So thanks so much for calling.
No problem. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I
So
guess
the caller on the ball, man. The caller know where we're going with this thing. All right, right. Thanks for calling. The vaccine.
The vaccine, yeah.
The vaccine. That is really now. So lockdown was one thing. Lockdown is one thing. Lockdown here, lockdown everywhere, right? But vaccine now retail a little while. We know about lockdown. We don't know about vaccine that much. We don't know the efficacy of it. We don't know the access to it. Right now, we had 40,000 that was supposed to be for the first dose. Then second dose supposed to come. All of this. What are your foremost thoughts on the vaccine itself, Doctor? On the vaccines.
So let me start from the outset. The vaccine would be the most expeditious solution for this pandemic. Okay. And the vaccine has to have certain characteristics in order for it to actually make a permanent dent and to actually get us out of this. The vaccine has to have durable efficacy. Efficacy meaning that it stops, it prevents the virus, or it prevents people from dying from the virus. And it has to last long enough. And I could hope that it is relevant to the strains that are upcoming. There is a lot of controversy around the vaccines, which I would suggest is not really, at least in the sphere of social media, is not given its proper hearing. The current vaccine, so if we take, for example, the AstraZeneca vaccine was trialed in about 20,000 healthcare workers in Brazil, South Africa, and the UK. And the mean follow-up for that was about 3.4 months. So we have 3.4 months of data on the AstraZeneca vaccine. The vaccine itself has a touted efficacy of about 70%. The number of persons who actually contracted the virus during that trial, and let me just open it here, was actually quite low in both groups, the control arm and the trial arm. So what we really, let me see here, antibody, too much thing for me to remember everything, but I just pull up the safety and efficacy. So this is by Voice et al. This came out in, this is what, Lancet, yeah? So what they found was that the efficacy, vaccine efficacy was about 60 receive standard dose. And they did something interesting. They used a low dose too. So they weren't too sure what the best spacing was for the vaccine. Should it be 4 weeks? Should it be 12 weeks? They're not too sure. They're just trying now. Okay. So they found it was about 62% efficacious in the control group. So the control group were people who got meningitis vaccine. So it was actually a trial that studied persons who were aged 18 to 55. So these persons were aged 18 to 55. And the control group were vaccinated with a meningitis vaccine. And the test group was the ChAdOx, which is the AstraZeneca vaccine. What they found is that there were 27 cases just now. Right, 27 plus 60. Right. Right. Just 27. So there are 27 cases who got the virus in the vaccine group and 71 in the control group. So that yielded an efficacy of 62. And that's in the standard dose. And in the low dose, which is something they just experimented with, they found the efficacy was 90%. So it actually prevented the virus 90%, right? So this was 3 persons. 3 persons got the virus in the control group versus 30 persons in, 3 persons got it in the vaccine group versus 30 persons in the control group. I want you to try to understand what I'm saying here, right?
Yeah,
we're looking at a trial here. We're looking at a trial here that involved about 40,000 persons, okay?
Right.
And the number of positive cases, yeah? So where they generated this number of 90% efficacy was that 3 persons in the vaccine group, which was in the, this is the low dose, yeah? 3 persons got it and 30 persons got it in the control group. Do you understand what we're saying here? That is in the low dose. And in the standard dose, it was 27 persons got it in if they got the vaccine versus 71 persons got it if they got the control group. This is a very, very small number of persons.
When you say when they got the vaccine versus control group, what's the difference there?
Control group is meningitis vaccine. So if people got meningitis vaccine, okay?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like in the persons, among the persons who got meningitis vaccine, 71 of 4,000. What does this say? 71 got the virus versus 27 got the virus in the vaccine group. So this is where you generate. This is actually the data. I will share these papers. You all can look at it. This is the actual data that was taken to the bank. So this is what we're using to say, okay, we're going to vaccinate a few billion people, right? The data is very...
40,000.
Yeah, it's not... No. It wasn't 40,000. Huh?
4,000.
Yeah. It was in total 23,848 persons in the age group 18 to 55. Okay, so this was not in the target age group. You remember that the vaccine, when they rolled it out, they took it straight to persons over 80 and straight to persons over 70. So what this is saying is that, okay, it seems to work. And more than that, what they found too was that it reduced hospitalization in the vaccinated group. In the persons who got the vaccine on the question versus meningitis, it reduced hospitalization a little bit, and it also reduced the cases of severe. So in the persons who get the meningitis group, you had 1 meningitis vaccine. They had 1 person who got severe, and you had, I'll tell you, 6 plus 5, that's 11. You had 16 persons who ended up in hospital in the meningitis vaccine group versus 2 in the Chadox in the AstraZeneca group. So these are very kind of small numbers, right? Now there are certain questions that still remain. Remember that the follow-up is 3.4 months. The follow-up is 3.4 months, right? And so we really don't know what happens after that. Also, we don't know what variant the vaccine was trialed on. Because back then when they were doing it, they didn't know about the variants. So we really don't know those things. You understand? Right. But it looks good. It looks good at this time. It looks good. It looks all right.
Relatively.
Yeah, I mean, it's not real convincing. It's a small number. But it's all right. Not looking bad. Right?
But Doc, let me ask this question though. I mean, they're talking about basically pushing towards vaccination and vaccination being the main hope in terms of treating with, the way forward with COVID and that kind of thing. But I noticed that we are getting guidance. Basically, people below 16 shouldn't get the vaccine. Is it that because for them to get vaccinated, is it that they're looking for some sort of herd immunity effect with everyone being vaccinated above 16, and therefore they will never vaccinate people below 16. How it is they're looking to treat with people below 16?
You really cannot. No, we have to understand this. This data that I'm reading to you is what you call interim analysis, right? It's 3.4 months of data. The average vaccine trial, phase 3 trial, the average vaccine cycle is about 10 years or more. It takes about 10 years or more. And the reason for that, people would say, well, all right, look, now we have modern technology. We could develop vaccines faster. We could develop drugs faster. You may be able to discover a drug faster. Remember, these vaccines are totally novel technology. Yeah? This is totally novel. Both of them are totally novel. The AstraZeneca vaccine is a what you call adenoviral vector vaccine with a DNA version of the coronavirus spike protein, right? Inside it. It's a new type of tech. It's a new type of biotech, right? So usually it will take about 10 years to really generate any substantial safety data, right? Now, so what these vaccines have been granted are emergency use authorization. The FDA didn't. It would have been the European version of the FDA granted the AstraZeneca. Yeah, right. So they said, okay, emergency use authorization, right? But really the safety data does not exist for you to trial it in children as yet.
Right.
As yet, right? So what they did is they said, okay, look, these guys are dying in droves, right? The persons over 70 are really high risk. So if the vaccine, the side effects or the potential ill effects of the vaccine cannot outweigh it cannot be worse than COVID, because really it would be worse than COVID in the young group. It can, let me be clear. It can potentially be worse than COVID in a younger group, right? So you will trial it in somebody who you can find. You will trial it in a group that you can find rational for using it. You say, all right, it might protect these people, and they're already dying. Their death rate is pretty high. So I mean, you understand?
So if what we're doing is basically the leaders of the various countries, because we fall under the AMC 92 countries, right? The 92 poorest countries that they're basically looking for COVAX to target. And you have people making judgments based on these vaccine rollouts. We are seeing that everybody not getting the vaccine equally. So everybody not getting the same vaccine. But generally, the AMC 92 is getting the AstraZeneca. But wouldn't even that require some sort of controlled management of how that vaccine rolls out in terms of, well, what sort of variants your country is exposed to? In other words, considering the uniqueness of the country and how they respond, as in the case of Seychelles and Chile, because Seychelles and Chile give really interesting results. I don't know if you could talk a little bit about those results so that people could understand that it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah, so both of them, well, you remember, so Chile is a Sinovac country, right?
Right.
Sinovac is a different vaccine. That's, I think, an attenuated virus. More similar to the original type vaccines, not like these more designer vaccines like the mRNA or AstraZeneca. What Chile has seen after vaccinating more than 50% of its population is an unprecedented surge in deaths. You understand what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
So what Chile has seen after vaccinating highly, right, is that their death rate went up.
Where's that one, boy?
And not by a small amount of cutter. We're looking at 9,000 cases a day right now, as at April 9th.
And how much percentage of the population has been vaccinated?
Well, 50%. 50%. About 50%, yeah.
So what in your estimation would have contributed to the vaccine rollout and the relationship to that?
What in my estimation
would be contributing to the fact that they have such a high rate of vaccination, and you're saying that how it is after the vaccination drive that they would have had a spike. Are you saying that? Is that what happened?
So let me show you some data here. Is there a particular reason that you brought up Seychelles though? What's your take on Seychelles, Shankar?
Yeah, partner of mine, Ravi, big up. I know Ravi on the chat, but Ravi, my partner from Seychelles, so he telling me what he's seen out there, you know.
Yeah. What exactly is how Seychelles looking good?
So Seychelles, so let me give the numbers of Seychelles, and I'll tell you why in particular Seychelles is so interesting, Doc. If you look at the global index of everybody that get vaccinated across the world, we spoke about some of those numbers last week. Trinidad is 130 out in the index. Gibraltar is first with a very high number. Seychelles is second in the world. In the world. Going at 126 doses per 100 people, 123,000 doses issued. 58.2% of them are vaccinated. Their rising numbers, it basically had almost no numbers until they started to vaccinate around December. And between December and now, you had a steady rise to 6,000 cases a day. Compare that to Trinidad, which facing 11,000 cases overall. And Trinidad is 13 times the size of Seychelles.
All right, just now, Shankar, what you're saying is that Seychelles did not have any cases.
Very minimal. Correct.
And what happened after they vaccinated?
I think there was a relaxation of a lot of the restrictive measures in terms of the social distancing, the mask, just as like what happening in the US right now, where CDC has now said, well, if you're vaccinated, you could gather without masks. So it's a series of strategies.
So what we're saying then is that the vaccination, that the relaxation of the measures is really that is the corollary that results in a spike in cases after vaccination.
Correct.
That's what we're saying.
So is a public health management effect. The vaccine is just like a trigger or a method that these leaders using to then trigger certain public health decisions.
All right, let's go through some data, right? Now, if you want on your screen, if you want to pull up the UK data, you can type in UK COVID. Now I have all this.
You still can't share, Doc. Try clicking share, but on share screen. You have multiple screens up?
Well, not really,
Just one screen? Try sharing the screen one more time and see if it'll come through.
We had done a test run and it worked, but these things
because
go
you're sharing through Streamlabs, so you should be able to get through.
Yeah.
So we would really like to see that.
Try it again.
I see somebody commenters think that we know what we do in our bulk. Facebook don't have that.
No, we're using Facebook. We're using Streamlabs, which is something else.
So first seats think we backward,
Are you seeing my screen?
No.
I don't know why that's happening. But let me try to pull it up. UK COVID.
All right, go ahead. Go to UK COVID, right? We're just using this as an example, and I'm going to read to you some data. This is really unfortunate because I have the papers right in front of me. I would have loved it if you could have seen it. All right, let's see. Let me just open it up and see. Right?
But that's okay. We could always share it afterwards.
All right. Wait. Hold up. I think I got in it here. Come. Look at here.
Cam.
Look at here.
boy.
So all the ability people, we learning this technology. I mean, we mightn't be as backward as teens think we are, but we still learning technology. We still learning it.
Just now.
Apparently, there was
Just now. Hold on, hey guys.
I had to add it. I had to add it to the stream, but it was enough. It was out of my screen. It was like I had to scroll down to see it.
Change
I too much screen like it that way.
Ain't good. Ain't good at it.
All right. Okay. So you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have free reign there now, Doc. You have free reign there now.
So you see my screen, right?
Taking my
Okay. So this is data. This is data by Bernal and Andrews and Gower and so on. So these are guys who are in Public Health England. So this is the Public Health England. So after we did the study by Voicey, which I was showing you.
Rajiv, maximize it on your screen there. Maximize it.
All right. You seen it now? You seen it now?
Yeah.
So what I talked to you about before was safety and efficacy. That's this one. This is by Voicey et al. You can download it. You can type it in. Right. This is the actual data that was used to roll out the vaccine. Right. Now, after they roll out the vaccine, this paper comes out. So let me get to the top of this paper. Okay. So this is the Public Health England data. What's happening here? And this is from different parts of England. So you see in Cardiff and Ireland and Glasgow and so on, right? Okay. All right. So they were trying to figure out, they wanted to see what is the real world effectiveness of Pfizer and the AstraZeneca vaccine, which they were using at the time in England. They started to use the Pfizer vaccine on the 8th of December, and they brought out the AstraZeneca vaccine a little later. Okay. So what they wanted to do, they studied all patients who were 70 years and older who came into the hospital with symptoms of COVID. Not necessarily COVID, but flu-like symptoms. So they say, all right, all these guys, 70 years and over, at that point in time when the vaccination started on the 8th of December, they were only vaccinating persons over 70 and over. They started with 80 years and over, then they went to 70 years and over. Okay? So during that time, nobody under 70 was getting vaccinated besides some healthcare workers. Okay? All right. So they were looking at all the patients aged 70 years and over who were getting vaccines, and they wanted to see how these people were doing after they got their vaccine. All right. So, right. Okay. So what they found was that vaccine effects. They found that initially vaccinated persons had a higher odds of testing positive in the first 9 days after vaccination. You hearing what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
In the first 9 days after vaccination.
I think it hit it a little more zoom, and for people who are on their phone and things, because if you're on the phone, it when we hit it a little more zoom, like zoom it up a good bit. Yeah, right. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about.
Right. So in the first 9 days after vaccination, they found that the odds of testing positive for COVID increased with an odds ratio of 1.48, confidence interval well over 1. So this is statistically significant. Therefore, it indicated that these people had a higher risk of underlying infection. What they reasoned was that those persons who eventually got the vaccine but then ended up having a higher risk of getting COVID was that after getting the vaccine, the process of getting the vaccine itself and the fact that they were a more vulnerable population imbued a higher risk of getting the COVID, because in the immediate post-vaccination period, the vaccine does not work. Okay? It takes about 2 weeks for the vaccine to actually work. Right? So there's some time when you are actually more vulnerable after getting the vaccine. And this is, of course, the same thing you're saying, oh God, you're going in Seychelles, everybody get vaccinated, they walk outside, everybody start getting COVID, all kind of nonsense, right? Okay. What they said after that was that the vaccine effects, it reached an effectiveness of 70% after 28 days. Okay. So they're saying, okay, yeah, it works, but not in the immediate period. They said, this is the abstract I'm reading. They said they had an additional 43% lower risk of emergency hospitalization and an additional 51% lower risk of death in the vaccinated population. So it seems as if the vaccine is working quite well. Okay. All right. Now, when we get into the actual data, the data really struck me. Okay. If you look at it here, there were about 156,930 persons were successfully linked to vaccination data. So basically they had a full data set on these guys. So they 156,000 persons they studied. All of these persons were coming into the NHS because they had some kind of fever or runny nose or sore throat or something, or loss of smell or something. And they said, okay, we're going to test all these guys, right? What they found was that 44,590 persons tested positive and 112,340 persons tested negative. Yeah, you're following me so far? Okay. All right. So, but something very interesting emerged here. What I saw, as you can clearly see it right here, among the positive tests, 44,590, 19,000, sorry, I'm saying the opposite. 19,960 got AstraZeneca. Let me correct myself. AstraZeneca was started before Pfizer. Yeah? I may have made that error and said the opposite. Yeah? Let me correct myself. 19,960 got AstraZeneca. 12,872 persons got the Pfizer BioNTech. And 11,758 were unvaccinated, which means that 74% of persons who had COVID were vaccinated. You understand what I'm saying? I find that to be rather disturbing.
Yeah, but nobody was really claiming that you're not going to get COVID. The whole plan, from what I understood, of the vaccine was to reduce strain on hospitalization. So, I think you mentioned before, that part of the results did show that the severe symptoms were reduced, and you wasn't ended up in hospital, and thus you wasn't gonna less likely to die in.
Yeah, this is what they are saying. So what I did, so here you can see the data here goes on. Okay, this is let's go here. This is the 70-year-old persons over 70. You can see that the odds ratio of getting COVID after getting the vaccine up to day 14 to 20 was, well, actually up to day 28 was increased. Okay, but it was significantly increased up to day 20, 1.29%. It went up to 1.44. So you had a higher risk of getting COVID after getting vaccinated with the vaccine, right?
Right, because as you say, you're relaxed and you're going around and you're
Not necessarily. Now I wouldn't suggest that. Now it could be a false positive, you know. It could be it could be that you're testing positive, but you're not really positive. It could be that too. Okay, it could be, if you really look at the people who search out vaccination, right? They are typically the kinds of persons who act in a more responsible manner. They're not the kind, and we're talking about persons over 70 years. Okay, we're not talking about persons. They would have given them, because it is common knowledge that you still have to wear a mask, you still have to be careful, you still have to. Okay, so I don't think, and besides which, they would have gone home and so on. So I don't think that these are people who they're going on the beach and all Marcus and thing. Well, this is England, right? But it's not like that you're going on party.
I might disagree with that.
All right.
I say that anecdotally. I had somebody ask me to hold my child.
Data now. So you can pull up. All right, I will pull it up for you. Let me pull it up here now. Okay, let us look here. England, COVID, right? All right. No, this is not. Just now. United Kingdom COVID. United Kingdom. All right. All right, let's look at the deaths now. Okay, let's zoom into the deaths here, right? So the period that we're looking at here, when the study was being conducted, remember this study is 156,000 persons, which is a sample of the people coming in. It's just a sample. It's not a survey. It's not everybody. The vaccine drive started on the 8th of December. Okay? So you had a wave starting somewhere in October, and the wave is climbing up gradually. Then you have the vaccine coming in here at the 8th of December. Okay? All right. So let us look and see here now. This is the actual data. This is the actual data here. Here it is. Right? Just now. You're seeing my screen, right?
Yes.
Right. Just now. Let me give you. Okay. This is the actual data for the world. Okay. These are the COVID deaths for the world. Right? This is every country in the world. You could download it. Anybody could download it. Okay. New deaths. That's all right. So I just pulled it up for the UK.
Right.
I compared it as well to the death rate of the persons in the UK over 70, not by COVID, just generally. Right? Just now, let me pull this up here. What we found here was that this is the persons over 70. Don't worry about the axis too much, but this is the weeks in the pandemic. This is up to 55 weeks in the pandemic. This is the first wave which occurred in April 2020. This is the second wave that occurred in January 2021. Yeah? This around here is December the 8th. If you look at it here, the actual number of persons that died in the second wave exceeded the first wave. So in the peak week, which was right here, this background here is the total number of persons dying over 70 years. Okay?
Right.
This background here is total. This is only 70 years and over, right? So this here is the peak week in April. Now let me just read that data for you here. So this is the data here. Yeah? Sorry, what is happening here? Okay. In the first wave, in the peak week of the first wave, there were 17,996 deaths. Can you read what I'm seeing here? You all can read what I'm seeing here?
Yeah.
Hello? You all can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
In the peak week of the first wave, there were 17,996 deaths between the 18th to the 24th of April 2020. And COVID accounted for 32%, 32.8%, which was about 5,000 deaths. Someone might think what you read.
Right.
Yeah. You might want to
COVID accounted
yeah.
for 5,910 deaths. This is in the first wave. So this was 32% of the deaths were COVID. In the second wave, which is January, right? The peak week of the second wave, there were 14,736 deaths in persons over 70. That's between the 23rd and the 29th of January. So if you look at your screen here, that's here. Okay? That's right here. 23rd to the 29th of January. That area there. In persons over 70. COVID now accounted for 8,406 deaths. That means that during this time, 57% of deaths in persons over 70 were due to COVID. Okay? So the second wave is much worse than the first. 57% of deaths. That's in the peak week, 7-day period. Right. By this time, 6,353 persons were already vaccinated. Okay? 80% of persons were vaccinated over 70 in England at the time of this peak week of this death rate.
Right. So that brings me to the question, Doc. So if you were to look at that, I mean, we can't categorically say that the trail off of the numbers in terms of the death. That same graph that you had, the graph on Google.
Yeah.
Now go back to the graph on Google.
This one here.
Correct. Right. So this trail off that you see in coming towards April is something that people could attribute to the vaccine working for that specific range of people, right? So if it is, I were to say, well, okay, well, this is a demonstration that the rollout of the vaccine program helps the situation with the deaths of people in that vulnerable region above 70 due to COVID. Click now, Doc, the equivalent for Seychelles.
For Seychelles?
So we just click on United Kingdom. Just change United Kingdom.
Let's trash out the reasoning quickly, right? What we're seeing here is you are saying that this attenuation in the wave is due to vaccination, right? Correct. You're saying that this is going down because of vaccination. Correct. What happened here in the first wave? That's the question I'm asking.
The lockdown.
What would you say the lockdown? So you're thinking that it's seasonality?
Yeah, some people could say seasonality, right? you could say lockdown, but as I told you, the lockdowns usually trail off. They usually come in at a time when everybody already got sick and they're getting sicker. They already got infected and they're getting sick, right? But so what we're saying here is that we are attributing the attenuation of the second wave to the vaccination, right? But what we're saying is that in the critical period after the patients were vaccinated, within that first 2 weeks, when they had a higher odds ratio of getting COVID, there's a massive spike in cases and deaths. You understand what I'm saying? Now, I cannot say, I cannot tell you exactly why that is. What I can tell you is that if you look at many places around the world. Now, I study many different countries, right? Let's take for example, Canada started its vaccine drive on the 6th of January, and here you have the 6th of January is around here, right? Then you see it started on this peak here, and then we have a second peak right afterwards with a higher number of deaths. Where's the death? Here you have Brazil. Brazil started right here on the 23rd of January, and here we have this massive spike here. I cannot tell you exactly why that is. What I'm saying is there seems to be a temporal relationship with mass vaccination rollout and some spike in deaths.
As the Canadian here,
if you look
and living through
Canada,
so I think
look at Chile here.
I think there's something to be said, or maybe it's the language that's being used. I think there might be a difference between countries rolling out the vaccine and people actually taking the vaccine. I think that's two different things, because the government of Canada rolled out vaccine, but people wasn't taking the vaccine. So yes, the vaccination started on the 6th or whatever, but there was a lot of vaccine hesitancy.
And then,
if you look at where the vaccine rollout,
and then someone
look at March in Canada. If you look at March in Canada and you look at March here, you will see that March, when it really started to ramp up in Canada, then you start to see this massive surge. This is in cases, but deaths is the same. You could anybody here who's looking could type it in. Just type in Canada COVID cases and time it. Look here, you could see this is Chile. Let's look at here. If you look at Gibraltar, have a look at Gibraltar. Gibraltar is 100% vaccinated. Gibraltar had very little deaths prior to the vaccines. The vaccine started on the 10th of January. Look at here, 10th of January, and that is the only time you had a massive spike in deaths. Everybody's attributing and saying people behaving bad. That is why they get the vaccine and behaving bad. What I'm saying is that, okay, that may be one explanation, but I'm saying that it is something that should give us a little pause. That it is a phenomenon that we should be studying, right? There was a little spike in Hawaii here. If you look at Hungary, once again, you have a massive surge right after vaccination started. Here you could see it was ramping up somewhere in March. Then you have a massive surge right here. You could see this is Hungary deaths. So this is the actual cases. This is the deaths. You could see there's a surge. You could always see that the wave after the vaccine, there's a higher spike. Have a look at let's look at India too. India was very, very, very stable. In January, they started to surge vaccination in Maharashtra, which was on the 15th of March. Look what happens after that.
Yeah, but they also started to surge in and relax other measures though.
Not really. India was never really. You cannot mask India. You could have never masked India. India is a place that they are mixing and so on.
Yeah, and remember you also had like the Kumbh Mela and thing happening around that time that they really couldn't control that. That is, that is something.
So is it activity? But then is it activity? Is does the activity? So I mean, all of this being said, that there seems to be. Of course, no one here is saying that that it is the fault of this one cause, or that there is no relation to. There's gray areas obviously in this all, right? But clearly there must be some form of social activity or social disposition that bleeds into something to do with this. Because I mean, in India, we know for a fact that whether it's Maharashtra, whichever area it was, there right now, where is India really feeling the brunt of it right now?
New Delhi and
in
Nepal.
Maharashtra, where there was the highest number of vaccinations. Now,
Is that the only
Maharashtra?
place?
I think my last check was more than 60.
Is Maharashtra the only? Because is Maharashtra the only area where they are seeing that
It's spiking.
spike?
No. It is spiking. It is spiking because there's a lot of no. And there's vaccination all across India. India is nearly 10%. India is about 10% vaccinated, right?
Right.
Sure.
But usually you start to see the spike around 5 to 10%, right?
Right.
Now, again, you have to be very careful in making these assertions because they do not hold true for every place. Okay, you can look here at Qatar. You see the same trend in Qatar. Vaccination started. 36% Qatar has vaccinated 36% of its population. Then you could see you could see the surge in deaths. Here you could see Nigeria is one of the safest places in the world when it comes to. In fact, most of the African continents have very, very little deaths. Very, very little deaths. If you look at Monaco, we're not seeing that exact trend. The United States, Israel. So Israel is another thing that is quite interesting. Serbia, we still see the trend. Here you can see Singapore. The trend doesn't exist. The trend doesn't exist. 24%, but we're not seeing any spikes here.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I want to point out, Doc. I mean, because clearly, Qatar. I mean, the level of interest that we're getting from the comments and from the viewers, and I mean, even for me sitting here, I mean, there's a whole great set of information you're bringing, Doc, that I think is something that we really wanted to get in the discussion. To really, we're talking pure facts, no matter what level the facts are. But one comment I want to make, Doc, before we look to segue towards the latter part of the discussions, because I think, Qatar, we would have to do multiple shows to really get to the bottom of this data. But one point that I want to point out is that, one, the data tells a very interesting story. And we really appreciate, Doc, you showing us where we could get this data so that people could make an informed position. As we always say, knowledge is power. But just looking at the data, we could see that there are different stories depending on what place around the world you look at. So one thing that I want to spark the conversation coming to the end here is the topic of vaccine sovereignty, which is something that has been picking up momentum over the past month or so. Turkey is really pushing it very hard. Cuba is pushing it very hard. And now there are actually some concerns coming within the Caribbean region where Trinidad has to basically beg for vaccines, where we have one of the largest manufacturing capacity across the Caribbean. So between us and Jamaica, we're basically the powerhouses of manufacturing. Why, if the AstraZeneca cocktail or recipe, for lack of a better word, is open and people could access it, which is different to the Pfizer and Moderna, where people are lobbying for them to liberalize their recipe as well. Why doesn't Trinidad create its own vaccine and manufacture it locally? Why don't we, if we have the capacity, why do we keep dependent on, so no problem in asking people for it, but if we're looking at a 2-year exit strategy, why doesn't the leadership basically look to build that capacity? I mean, I personally met with 19 of the strongest manufacturers in Trinidad, and I could tell you they have significant capacity. So why not basically give them the recipe of AstraZeneca and basically say, listen, guys, by the end of the year, you produce 250,000, you produce 250,000. So by next year,
I just maybe I'm a little ill-informed about this. You're saying that the AstraZeneca patent is open to the public?
Yeah. AstraZeneca is one of the few that is open. The two that is not open is the large pharmaceuticals, which is Pfizer and Moderna. Pfizer and Moderna not open, but the AstraZeneca one is public. I will have to find the actual link, but I found it on the WHO website a couple of days ago.
So We don't have any we don't have a legacy of GMP um, for pharmaceutical manufacture. So I don't see how I mean, we don't even manufacture Panadol. I think I think it will be
I want to know Matux. If we're talking about Matux,
right? So carry right and carry the conversation further. In that, right now, you have. Let me see if I get the facts correct. All right. Right. So the same EMA, which is the organization out of EU, sued AstraZeneca for breach of contract because they didn't deliver the 90 million doses that they were actually promised. And the result of that is that they pivoted to Pfizer in a record $1.8 billion deal. All right, and that's the largest vaccine deal across the world right now. So essentially, what you have is the EU medical leader essentially saying that, I understand the flux that we are caught between in terms of who is going to get these vaccines first. I mean, Trinidad and Tobago in a very sad state in terms of getting vaccines. Something that I don't think is going to change because of how the COVAX is structured for the AMC for the AMC 92 countries. Hello. So if it is we always going to be lowest on the pecking order, the question is these same EMA people reaching out to Belgium, they're reaching out to the Serum Institute of India, and a few others in India. India has come out and said, listen, we have to see about our people first. Doc, if that continues for the next 6 months, because the situation in India is really bad, is it that everyone will just continue to fold their hands and say, well, we have to wait on India? And I'm saying that from a public health leadership perspective. It's not an easy question to answer, and it's basically, do we continue to wait to get vaccines, or do we start to create an environment within Trinidad and Tobago, within Jamaica, which is the two manufacturing giants in the region, to start to innovate towards being able to manufacture that? And the reason why I'm saying that, I ain't just pulling it out of a hat. If you look at Taiwan, a lot of people saying, why was Taiwan's response to the COVID thing so good? Why was it so good? And I'm saying that because I'm in the Pacific. So everyone talks about Taiwan over here and how well they're doing. And Taiwan's story has been consistent, which is that, listen, by the time COVID hit us, that wasn't the first pandemic that we faced over the past 3 years. We just came off of SARS. So because we just came off of SARS and we were hit almost as bad as everybody's being hit by COVID now, all our systems, our manufacturing, our technology, everything had upgraded to deal with SARS. So by the time COVID came, all our systems were already resilient enough to deal with SARS. But you see, their leadership took the responsibility to grow that capacity in the industry. In other words,
right.
In our case in the Caribbean, we are being told, fold your hands and just take what you get. I am saying, I think we're not giving ourselves enough credit. If it is, the issue is controls, then that's a public health issue that needs to be addressed from that side. So that means some expert needs to be brought in order to set the controls. That means enforcement isn't in place in order to create the environment. Now, the nature of Caribbean people and Trinis is that, well, boy, who you going to have to do that? Matux, you're going to get Sunshine Snacks that you're going to take. But don't get tired. Sunshine Snacks, which is Associated Brands, is one of the largest manufacturers in the entire region. And every Caribbean island that you go, you will see a product from Associated Brands. They are known as one of the best manufacturers that it have out there. So the question is, if they could manufacture something like chocolate, why you can't manufacture something like a vaccine? And I'm not saying that to say it is, a ridiculous comment. It's a comment that people we back against the wall. You understand? You just get 40,000 and you're being told, be happy with that. You understand?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought that we should be, we have a lot of potential. We have the petrochemical industry has been here, and we have a lot of capacity to have a thriving pharmaceutical industry. I mean, Barbados manufactures a few things. We use Barbados drugs here. I can't answer why I find it ridiculous myself. Sometimes you look at some of these devices that we use, medical devices, like even like a needle or all of these things we could do normal saline. We should be able to do these things, right? Because we're running dry on these things too. A lot of drugs and so on, very common, old-time drugs that are very essential on the WHO essential list. We should have been able to manufacture. I totally agree with you.
But that comes into a whole discussion about the culture and the nature of things and the curse of Trini.
But Cutter, hear why I'm saying that. The question that the lady asked originally, that when you put her on the phone, that was the question she asked, She said, well, if Cuba come in with vaccine, should we take that? That's what Cuba is one of the leaders of vaccine sovereignty. That is exactly what Cuba is doing. And Cutter, if Cuba come with doctors, Trini is the first in line. Yes, send your doctors by we. Yes, send your nurses by we. So there is faith in that system over there. So you feel if Cuba produce vaccines, Trinidad not going to take? So then the question is really, if we take it from Cuba, why we don't have faith in our own capacity to generate something like that?
Good question. Good question.
It's heights.
Good question.
But again, as you say, this could take us into a whole another episode and so on. I want to just talk back a bit to all the data that was presented, and we get a lot of comments and things about it. So, Doc, what would you say that in relation to all the data that you presented tonight, in relation to the vaccine aspect and the rollout and the spikes and all that, do you have a hypothesis in relation to that, or is it just that you find the data to be interesting?
Well, I mean, the thing is, now, what happened with this virus is not a stable virus. Okay. No, I'm not a virologist too, right? But I could just postulate a little bit, right? This virus is mutating very, very quickly. Very, very quickly, right? Aside from the strains that we know about, the Brazilian, South African, now the talk double mutant, which is the Indian strain, and of course the UK strain, which has become the world dominant strain. They have plenty other strains. But a lot of those strains do not seem to be as virulent as, say, like the Brazilian strain or so. Okay? Or at least they're not spreading as fast. They don't have as high transmissibility, things like that. So if you go into the literature, you'll see, they discovered a very mild strain, and it's become commonplace and so on. We are trying to vaccinate in I would say a coronavirus ecosystem. We are trying to knock out some strains while leaving others. This is what I could see. Imagine that you have the first wave bringing in the wild type variant, or the China virus, right? It's called China virus, right? You bring in the China virus, right? The Wuhan strain. And that now comes in, it's novel, it knocks down a few people, we have some deaths and so on. Then it settles into the population. Okay. So let us say when they do serology studies, they say, hold on, 30% of people they get this virus, or 50% of people, like when they go in India and think 50% of people already had the virus and everybody moving around like normal. Mask or no mask, it don't matter anymore. Okay. Imagine if you go and you take a strategy and you knock out that strain. This is I am just postulating this. If you knock that strain out, do you open up the field then to the spread of a new strain? This is my worry. This is my fear.
And what do you mean by knocking out that strain and opening up? Are you talking about the nature of the virus itself and the way we handling it and the nature of the virus as an entity that wants to survive and it is mutating, and what really is the
Well,
concern?
the virus don't want to do anything, right? The virus just replicated. And every time it replicates, it's probably making some errors. And it there's what you call antigenic drift. So the virus is just mutating into different things from time to time. Okay?
Right.
But what is happening is that over time, the virus, it will try to, a particular strain will emerge that is in balance with the population. It's in balance. Okay?
Right.
It's not killing everybody. It's just living in harmony. Because if imagine if you have a bad strain that killing out everybody, well then it would have killed its host. So then that strain basically destroys its own environment. It ceases to exist.
Right.
Okay, it's like you mash up your own house, so you can't have nowhere to live again.
Right.
So the strain that is going to be that's going to come out stronger is the one that doesn't kill people. It just go from person to person, make them a little sick. Now, people ask, I want you to consider what happened with the Spanish flu in 1918. Okay? The Spanish flu in 1918 was much worse than COVID. It knocked off about 50 million people, and we're talking about persons in their 30s. People, COVID and so on is older people. Okay? So the Spanish flu knocked off young people, about 50 million people in a year or so. Okay? In the first few months, it started to knock off millions of people. The question is, where is the Spanish flu now? The Spanish flu is an influenza virus. All right? There's no vaccine for the Spanish flu. It had 3 waves, and I think each wave was worse, and then it just suddenly petered out. Okay? When they do studies on that, the Spanish flu did not disappear. It just mutated into a form that was more amenable to its survival with its host. So when they look, and there was actually a scare in 1970, I think it was 1976 or so, when they say, oh God, swine flu coming back, or the Spanish flu is coming back, and they started to try to vaccinate people and so on. That vaccine rollout didn't work well. They had 25 deaths in the vaccine group, and they had a whole bunch of Guillain-Barré. They had some Guillain-Barré, and they shut down that vaccine. Okay? But there was a worry, and when you study that, they say, but you know something, that is a virus that is similar to the original Spanish flu. So where is the Spanish flu now? It's just right around us. It is just the seasonal flu.
But the Spanish flu was in the 1920s, I believe.
1919, 1920, yeah. That pandemic.
Right. So
okay.
And when would you say it started to peter out, and that would have been probably
about
like what?
Years.
How long after?
Yeah, no, it petered out. About 3 years.
Yeah.
So 3 years.
It was fast.
I haven't petered out about 3 years. I mean,
it was fast. It wasn't. It was.
But you said that the Spanish flu was more deadly, not so?
Yeah. It's more deadly than COVID for sure. But back then we wasn't treating people either. You didn't have steroids. You didn't have inhaled steroids. You didn't have any kind of antiviral. You didn't have anything. Yeah. You didn't have a nebulizer. You didn't have oxygen. You didn't have anything.
So, but this brings me back to the question: what do you actually think about the vaccination process overall? What is your hypothesis on it then? That we're doing something wrong by vaccinating?
So the question is, if we are interfering with an ecosystem that is evolving, okay? Viral mutants are in competition with each other. Herd immunity occurs, okay? Herd immunity can come naturally, or it can come through vaccination, okay? When you vaccinate people,
right,
it means that you create a barrier, you create a buffer between a susceptible individual and a chain of individuals around them that are resistant to the virus. All right? You have a buffer of persons who are resistant to the virus in question, surrounding a person who is vulnerable. That person who is vulnerable will only become infected if somebody who is around them brings that infection to them. But if the people around them are immune to it, they're not going to bring it to them. That's the whole idea with herd immunity. Okay?
No. And do you think that the herd immunity is one of the most talked about things since I believe Sweden tried that approach and so on, and then there's a lot of controversy with that. And then do you think that the herd immunity approach is more sensible than the another approach through herd immunity through vaccination, or is it that you think the vaccination herd immunity approach is not as effective as letting it run its course?
We have to take any measure that we can to reduce the death rate. It is unacceptable to allow people to get virus and die. That's just ridiculous, right? We're literally at war, and you have to be using anything at your disposal. This is why early outpatient treatment, to me, was the most sensible and pragmatic approach. It means that what you're trying to do is that if somebody gets the virus, you get it out of them as fast as possible. You boost their immune system and get them over as fast as possible. You don't wait on them to go home. You don't leave them home to end up in ICU afterwards. So now, if a person recovers from COVID, they will develop some level of immunity. Okay? So you will develop immunity in that way. Leaving what Boris Johnson and they did was, to me, just criminal, because they were playing with something that they had no clue about. They just had no idea what that was about. Okay? So you just say, all right, many of us will die, but we will. That's ridiculous. Many of us will die. That's what Johnson said. Okay, but we are prepared. You don't do things like that. When you don't understand something, you don't mess around with it, right? But what I'm saying is that here now, is it that by knocking out the wild type strain that is common, right? The wild type strain. Now this is just conjecture, but I don't think you can be infected. You can have two strains inside your body at the same time, okay? But I don't think that you will be diseased by them at the same time. I think one will predominate. If one particular strain is dominant in the society, one particular strain, let us say the Wuhan strain is dominant, which is becoming a milder strain by virtue of maybe some level of antigenic drift or something else, right? If that strain is common to people and they're living with it happily, and it is going from person to person, and they're living with it, and they get a little sick and they get over, like what we've been doing in Trinidad. If you go and you nuke that strain out, I am wondering if you nuke it out, if you leave the pop and you use a vaccine that selectively targets that strain, but does not generate humoral immunity to the emergent strains, like for example the P1 variant or the B117 variant or so. If you use a vaccine that nukes out the original strain, do you leave the population vulnerable to an explosion in cases of a mutant virus? That is what I am wondering, and that's the only thing I can see. To me, is it helps me to understand what is going on in some of these places, and that's why I wonder, in the places that had a heavy rollout of vaccines early, if those places, the strains came from there. South Africa, Brazil, and England. If you notice, AstraZeneca started there. South Africa, Brazil, and England. You have strains coming from directly there. And that is what is making me wonder. That is why I am saying it. I feel that we have to approach this not with hysterics, not with the kind of hysterics that we have. We're all piling up and so on. Right? But we need to be cautious. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I mean, I want to add to what the doctor's saying, and perhaps it would be good to do another episode specifically about the variants and the nature of the evolution of viruses and whatnot. Chris Parrott would be a good person. He's an epidemiologist who would have studied the Ebola virus and that kind of thing. So he would have been experiencing, the seeing and studying the evolution of viruses and whatnot. So I think to have one session specifically focusing on that, on the variants, because there's a lot of science there and there's a lot of depth to that discussion that I think people would appreciate the details that come with that.
Yeah, we will definitely have to get Chris on, and we'll want to have Rajiv back on, because they both bring a very well-informed perspective to the topic.
There's a question in the comments here.
Yeah.
This is Trini Chocolate blog is saying, but annual vaccination for influenza has not caused a super mutant deadly strain of influenza to emerge. That's true. That's because if you really look at the R0 of the reproduction number of influenza is a lot lower than coronavirus, and influenza is a disease that allows people to self-isolate when they're sick. Remember, I said something. I remember I was saying that in COVID, you're spreading it and you don't know. This is why it's almost impossible to contain, right? So how is it that vaccinations are not causing a super mutant in influenza? Well, every virus is different, and that virus certainly has a different transmission characteristic versus this virus.
Fair enough. Yes. Also, well, we had people talking about the air and the sunshine snack, so they don't know about that one. So they're not sure sunshine snack might be the best person. And then other people like in terms of Canada, as Torian was saying, that there would have been spikes in infections, but little spike in deaths because would have been in certain areas. There would have been vaccine drives due to the high level of infections in those areas and all of that. So it's really again, there's so much that we could look at in terms of the data from different realms of it, and a lot of the data is not there for us to really say, because it comes down to like just what they were saying today in our press conferences, when it comes down like trying to get someone's history on what they did when for the past 7 days when they talk to them and they want to do contact tracing, and the people just forget to say a million things they do because they just think went to work and I came back home, and they're not talking about when they stopped to buy the watermelon here, and I'm trying to say that it's so much things you have to take into consideration with the spread of the virus, the spread, the spikes, the vaccination drive right now in Trinidad. Right now we're going to use apparently all the doses out for first doses. We are right now 10 days away from a collapse of the parallel healthcare system, apparently. So it's a very, very interesting time. And I think over the next 2-3 weeks with the new lockdown measures, it's really going to be interesting to see what really plays off. Because if it is, as they say, and if Trinis continue to do what the Urban Dictionary has now registered as jackass is seen, and if the authorities also jackass is seen as well, and if the vaccine drives also allow for a certain level of jackassery, who knows what could be next on the horizon for Trinidad and Tobago. But I want to really thank Rajiv. Rajiv, you'll be seeing a lot of different things there in the comments, but we can't touch on everything today. But we want to thank you a lot for coming on and bringing your perspective and bringing your research. Right, it was much welcome. I am pretty sure we want to have you again on the show, along with another few authorities on different matters, so we can all kind of feed into each other's perspectives. And with that being said, what's the state of the ICUs? The ICUs and the HDUs are very, very strained at this point in time. The capacity is, especially for the we have a healthcare system that's pretty much just for COVID, and that's almost at its peak right now. Its breaking point right now, and that's when that bus, well, then is mad scene, and then you might really hear about curfew and that kind of thing if that is really the scene. I don't know. You don't know, because again, the authorities seem to be making it up as they go along with the measures, because clearly we're back to square one with this. And we have people appreciate the information. Nice show, guys. Yeah, Wendell, big up. So yeah, Rajiv, once again, thanks for coming on. It was a wonderful, informative discussion. And
if you want me to share any of the papers, look, I know. Again, I'm reading the comments. What I'm saying is, to me, it's jarring. I think it's jarring, and to some extent, it is conjectural, and it is based on data that we're seeing. And I'm encouraging people, if they want to see the papers, if they want to look at the data, please be curious. That's what I can say. Please be curious. Don't just take what is said by authority. Listen, go and search for it yourself. We are all intelligent people. Go and look for it.
I'll be sure to put up all the abstracts and journals and stuff that you have. I'll put them up on your Heights Room page for everybody to take a look at. I mean, that's the nitty-gritty of it all. Yes, please share any scientific studies papers you have. We're doing that. That's what it's all about, people keeping informed. So we're just about at the almost 2-hour mark, much longer than we expected. I think I flipped up there on the screen if I'm not mistaken. So are you all hearing me right?
Yeah, just talking.
Okay, yeah. Well, clearly, my pan have refused to
not
work.
good.
But right. But thank you all very much for tuning in. I see we have a bit of viewers still on for the 2 hours. You all have stamina, right? You all have stamina. Yeah, right. Travasiers will be proud of you all. So thank you so much, Rajiv, for being here. From everyone here in the Heights room and everybody viewing, big up all yourself. Be safe.
Thanks,
Pick up
guys.
soon.
A real
Come
pleasure.
on. Yeah.
Thank you.
As a-
Okay. Bye.
Later.